The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
How will the Nets' bold draft strategy impact the team's future?
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast.
Brian, we are still dealing with the fallout from what was a crazy draft night in Brooklyn last night. The Nets obviously setting a record, taking 5 players in the first round. No other team had ever done that before. So let's start there. We, knew about the volume of picks that the Nets had, and it had been floated leading up to the draft, like in the hours right before, that they might be comfortable making all these picks. How surprised are you that they actually made 5 first-round picks? Because when they had 4, it was a lot of people thought they were going to have to consolidate, trade up. Then they got another one and still made all the picks. So how surprising was that to you?
Oh, it was, well, I was stunned. I mean, I'll just, full disclosure, I just thought they were lying. There's no other way for me to put it. I thought it was a smokescreen. And I even said, listen, if I was a smart GM and I had picks and I was looking to move, whether that was move up or, punt one in the next year or consolidate or whatever, I probably would say, oh, I'm very comfortable making all of these picks. And then I would casually mention how great my development staff is and how we're so my coach can't wait to get his hands on all 5 young guys. That's what I would be saying. So that's what I thought they were doing. I thought they were just simply protecting the value of those picks before they moved one or more of them. But I was wrong.
And
clearly wrong.
And, I think the fact that they did stick in make all the picks, there's 2 things. I do know that they were at least inquiring about trading up further into the top 10. They had spoken with Philadelphia. I know they spoke with Charlotte, as numerous other teams did. Those teams, obviously the price was too high for them. And then when you look at potentially moving into the late lottery was something people had been talking about. And you look at a team like that made the biggest move.
I want to give you credit too, because I didn't know about Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I knew San Antonio, I knew Philadelphia, and then I think you reported Charlotte.
Yeah, numerous teams were talking to Charlotte. Like I've heard that. Yeah, they were a team that was seriously considering moving back, and I thought maybe they were waiting to see whether Philly stood there and took VJ Edgecombe, because they were said to have interest in Edgecombe. Charlotte was, and the Philly took him, but they seemed very comfortable taking Knipple. Nets fans' favorite guys, who they would have been so upset with at 8, ends up going 4. So what does that say? But talking about them potentially moving up into the late lottery, the team that made the biggest move, New Orleans, went from 23 to 10, and they paid a steep price. They gave up their 2026 first-round pick unprotected, which a move that's getting somewhat killed. Like, I think a lot of people rightfully think that was kind of a crazy move. But that just shows what the price might have been to move up. And clearly, the Nets might have thought that was too exorbitant, based on where they had guys ranked on their boards and how the draft was playing out. So that was one part of it. The next part of it that I want to get into with more detail is making all 5 of these picks seems to be part of a strategy that the Nets were, going with, of potential just high volume, multiple dart throws, giving themselves the highest chance to come away with maybe multiple, rotation guys out of this class. And I think that was also exemplified in the fact that they took 3 point guards, all who have pretty similar traits. They do some things differently, but in Yegor Dem and Nolan Traore and Ben Saraf, all, pass first guys, very talented, very unselfish, all struggle shooting from 3, but have some upside if certain things can hit. So it seems like they're playing the volume game overall, and then also with really wanting to get a high-level lead ball handler and targeting guys with similar traits who they thought could hit. So how do you feel overall about that strategy? Because I think a lot of draft people were scratching their heads seeing them take 3 international point guards. But there is, obviously some logic to it in the sense that they're trying to maximize their chances at, that archetype of player, them coming away with one who hits.
Yes. Well, what I would say is this: general managers like people in the dating pool have types, right? I mean, Masai Ujiri likes these long-armed, athletic, borderline anthropomorphic, like octopi. Like that's what he goes for, right? Sean Marks has generally gone for, high character Boy Scout guys. I personally, I have said I think they need more dogs in the locker room, and I've said this for years, but whatever. I think now he is added to that type, maybe after watching the NBA Finals, but I mean, clearly going for high feel, high BBIQ passers, guys that can move the ball and are not ball stoppers. It's interesting, and I don't generally do hypotheticals. I'm curious if they had managed to be able to move up to get, not that I ever thought they had a chance for it, but if they'd gotten a Dylan Harper, I wonder whether you would be taking dart throws at 3 or 4 point guards. I don't know. But clearly, they are leaning into trying to find as many chances to have a high-end, homegrown lead passer, right? That's clearly what they're after. We'll see how many of these come good. We may have to wait years to figure that out. But I mean, I think the plan, you can say what you want about it for better or worse, but the plan is pretty clear, crystal clear.
And Sean, as you noted throughout his tenure, high character guys always seem to be something that he places a heavy premium on. And then also, likes a lot of finesse players, guys who do certain things. And I think obviously Yegor Demon checks a lot of those boxes, especially from, a personality standpoint. I spoke with him at the Combine. We spoke with him yesterday, and everything I heard from people throughout the pre-draft process was that he crushed his interviews and that he's a great kid and is very team first and all that stuff. And then from the encore perspective, he is a little bit more of a finesse guy. Like, he's an incredible passer. He isn't exactly somebody who goes into people's chests, when he's driving to the basket. There might be some stereotypes about him as like the European classic stereotypes, which I think are, kind of getting dispelled now that more Euro players are, becoming so prevalent in the NBA. But when he made that pick, and from what you had heard about Demon throughout the pre-draft process, so, everything that I just touched on, was there a part of you who was like, here we go again, we're doing this again?
When he made the pick or leading into it?
When he made the pick.
Well, I think when he made the pick, my brain probably went blank for a second because I probably was in shock. I mean, I expected them to take him, but I thought they would either be taking him at 19 or be trading up from 19 to take him. I did not expect them to be taking him 8th. But yes, absolutely, there was smoke about them really liking him, being enamored with what they saw, during the pre-draft process, and I guess buying into that the shooting improvement was real. Now, maybe some people don't believe it was real because they have a whole lot of evidence prior to this that he can't shoot. But the Nets clearly bought into the small sample size. Whether that's recency bias or whether they know better, we'll find out.
And I've heard just from some other people talking about the fallout from this pick and, reaching out to me and saying, the Nets are getting killed and talking to people. There were other teams who really liked Yegor, not so far after the Nets. So people were talking about, could they get him at 19? Like, that was a projection in a lot of different places. Doesn't seem like he was getting to 19. It doesn't seem like I think it was probably unlikely that he was getting out of the lottery based on things that I had heard. And then I've heard since. And then going, based on the theme of what we're talking about with these ball handlers, the 3 guys they got, Demon, Traore, Saraf, we said all high feel, all pass first guys, all guys who play a certain way. And Sean Marks said some things about that in his post-draft press conference that I think will be interesting when you're trying to evaluate how the Nets want to play moving forward with Jordi Fernandez.
Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The Houston Rockets signed Fred VanVleet to a brand new contract and how it impacts their team building moving forward. Fred VanVleet, brand new contract with the Houston Rockets, 2 years, $50 million, as reported by Shams Charania, with a player option in year 2. We'll break down what that contract means and how it impacts the Rockets' financials going forward in just a moment. We'll also take a look at the relatively quiet, not even relatively quiet, absolutely just no noise during the first round of the NBA draft from the Houston Rockets. There were some reports they might be trying to trade back into the draft. Will we see any movement out of the Rockets in the second round of the draft? Talk about that, as well as a little bit of just general draft reaction, in particular with the Phoenix Suns actually making some decent moves, which is not good for the long-term future of those Suns picks that the Rockets still own. So we'll talk about all of that on today's show. Let's start with the big stuff, though. Fred VanVleet, brand new contract. Houston Rockets decline his team option and renegotiate a 2-year, $50 million deal with a player option in year 2. Look, awesome deal for the Houston Rockets. We've been kicking around what a Fred VanVleet contract would look like for what feels like a couple months now on the show. We've done multiple different episodes talking about, speculating. Would it be, 3 years, $60 million? Would it be 3 years, $100 million? Would it be 3 years, $75 million? We've gone back and forth with all these numbers. 2 years, $50 million is fantastic value for Fred VanVleet, and credit to Rafael Stone and Eli Whitus and the rest of the Rockets front office, and also credit to Fred, because at the end of the day, Fred wants to be here in Houston. The Rockets want Fred VanVleet as their continued point guard, at least for now, until Reed Shepherd is ready to take the reins somewhere down the line. He is very much the heart and soul of this Rockets team. He's the emotional leader of this Rockets team, and with them trying to compete at the highest level right now, it's important to be able to keep all these pieces in place. Fred's been a gigantic part of the Rockets' turnaround. He's an extension of Ime Udoka on the floor. This was a no-brainer. This was always going to be the outcome, unless there was some wild out there crazy scenario where a trade somehow presented itself where they absolutely needed to use Fred VanVleet's $45 million salary. This was going to be the outcome of Fred VanVleet's contract situation, a brand new deal that's incredibly team friendly. And people might be wondering, why did Fred VanVleet give back so much money, right? He's taking a $20 million pay cut on this new deal. I think the better way to look at it is the fact that the Rockets vastly overpaid for Fred's services when he originally came here. They had to pay the quote-unquote loser tax to steal Fred VanVleet away from the Toronto Raptors. So they overpaid for 2 years. That third year was never going to get picked up, right? The third year being tacked on, the $44.9 million, that was basically a way for Fred and his agent to parade around and be like, we got a 3-year max, right? It is what it is. But if you take the 2 years that he did earn on the overpaid contract, and then these next 2 years where he will be making $25 million a year, and if you average it out across all 4 years, shout out to my guy Yossi Goslin who broke it down, the math. If you average it out across all 4 years, he'll be making $33.4 million annually across the lifespan of these two contracts across all 4 years. And $33.4 million is about the value that you'd expect for Fred VanVleet. Maybe a little more than what you'd be comfortable paying him on a flat out regular contract. Again, I think $30 million is about that sweet spot for a guy of Fred's stature, and not stature, NBA stature, not height stature. but a guy, that brings to the table what Fred does as a leader, as a playmaker, as a secondary or tertiary scorer on some nights, the mentorship that he provides to the young guys, all that stuff, right? Fred's about a $25 to $30 million player, give or take, plus the defense, right? You can't ignore that side of the basketball either. So for the Rockets and Fred VanVleet to be able to come to this type of an agreement where his salary drops tremendously going into this next season, it adds a lot of flexibility for the Houston Rockets moving forward. It gives them a lot of flexibility beneath both of the aprons, the first and the second apron. It'll mean that they should, on paper, be able to have access to their full non-taxpayer MLE worth $14.1 million. Now, they might not use all of that because, as we talked about in our kind of cap breakdown episode just before this one, it might behoove the Rockets to avoid the luxury tax this upcoming season, if at all possible, before entering the luxury tax in subsequent seasons due to the penalties of the repeater tax, of being in the luxury tax multiple consecutive years in a row, and how that kind of factors and how that ultimately can really restrict you a little bit further down the line with other different payroll considerations and complications and all that stuff. So, and the other significant benefit here, with it only being a 2-year deal instead of committing to a 3 or a 4-year deal with Fred VanVleet, even just flat out assuming like it's a 2-year deal and like he'll be here for 2 years. Now, that's not even a fully guaranteed option because that second year is a player option on his contract, and there is going to be a lot of money flying around next offseason. It is being called a robust market. There are a lot of cap analysts who are looking at next summer as a summer where players are going to get flat out paid. And so for Fred, it might be an opportunity for him to look at declining that player option, leveraging another team against the Rockets, and basically saying, look, I could go to XYZ location. I can go to Washington and go lead their young guys there, whatever. They're willing to pay me this bag. I need you to match it or I'm going to leave. That might be the case. So it might only mean 1 more year of Fred VanVleet, but the length of that contract, be it just 1 year if he decides to bounce next summer for more money, or 2 years if he decides to pick up the player option because nobody out there wants to actually pay him $25 million, the shorter shelf life of that contract is ultimately better for the Rockets from a flexibility standpoint, especially when you consider that they have Reed Sheppard waiting in the wings, right? The Rockets are so internally high on Reed Sheppard. They truly believe that he is their point guard of the future and that the backcourt of Reed Sheppard and Amin Thompson is going to pair beautifully at some point down the line. It's just a matter of when, not if, at least if you talk to anybody within the organization. And so given Fred only having a 2-year deal, that means it gives you a little bit more optionality as far as potentially moving on to Reed Sheppard sooner rather than later, rather than having him kind of gated and being stuck behind Fred VanVleet in the depth chart for the foreseeable future. So really exciting stuff here. Absolutely fantastic deal for the Rockets. Great deal for Fred VanVleet. Shows that both sides are focused on the ultimate goal, which is winning at the highest level. Fred's sacrificing a little bit of money to give the Rockets that salary cap flexibility, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in just a second. And man, when you look at what the Rockets have done this offseason so far, between the Steven Adams, new contract, the team-friendly extension, Ime Udoka's extension, trading for Kevin Durant, now Fred VanVleet's new contract, and we haven't even hit free agency yet. The Rockets' brain trust of Rafael Stone, general manager, Eli Whitus, assistant GM, and Patrick Fertitta, as well as everybody else involved in the front office, they've absolutely been flat out killing it this offseason. This is what a good front office and a good, executive staff looks like at the end of the day. And just a ton of credit to all three of those guys in particular. That's kind of the Rockets' brain trust. They're the guys behind so many of the Rockets' big, important decisions. And really, ever since Tillman Fertitta went hands off, like after the Russell Westbrook trade debacle, like things have been running pretty smoothly for the Houston Rockets. So credit where credit is due. And I will say, I don't necessarily think they're done yet. I think that they know that there's still a couple stop gaps, a couple holes maybe in the roster that need to be filled, maybe still adding some shooting, looking to add somebody with that MLE this offseason, and or possibly facilitating a trade, maybe expanding on the initial framework of the Kevin Durant deal to loop in a third team. And you could factor in, trading away Jock Landale and Aaron Holiday's contracts to be able to bring in another impact player potentially. The Rockets have a lot of options there. So I'm sure that they're currently exploring all of them. And only time will tell whether or not the Rockets are able to pull something off, either with the KD trade or just flat out signing somebody in free agency. But we'll have to cover for all that stuff a little bit further down the line.
Buccaneers ownership rewards Jason Light and Todd Bowles.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The big news of the day, and that is both Jason Light and Todd Bowles get multi-year extensions on Thursday, showing the organization's faith and trust that they have in those two guys. Now, Jason Light is entering his 12th season as the general manager, while Todd Bowles has been the coach for the last 3 years and was entering the final year of his contract. Say what you will about Todd, but all this guy has done is win 3 straight division titles while navigating the transition to the post-Brady era. And his tenure started off late with the unexpected announcement of Bruce stepping down long after all the coaching vacancies had already been filled. And if I remember correctly, we were getting ready to start the combine, or the combine had just ended. It was really, really late in the process. So, he gets off to his start super, super late in that final year that Tom Brady played, then had to deal with all of that nonsense. He had to deal with the off-field problems for Tom Brady. There were plenty of injuries, still won the division. It wasn't a great year, but still got the job done. So although I've been critical of Bowles at times, and many fans have been critical of Bowles, he has done things that no other coach in franchise history has done, and that is winning the division 3 consecutive times. Now, as a GM, Light has overseen 4 consecutive division titles following their Super Bowl win. So these two have worked extremely well together, and that is being rewarded by ownership. In a statement that was released, owner and co-chairman Joel Glazer said, quote, Jason and Todd's leadership has been critical to our organization's success. The winning culture they have established has us well positioned for the future. The continuity and stability they provide will play a large role in our ability to compete for additional championships. End quote. Remember that word continuity. I'm going to bring it up about 67 more times here in the next couple of minutes. But for his part, Jason Light said, quote, I am very grateful to the Glazer family for the trust and belief they have shown in what we are doing here. I am also very excited to continue working alongside Todd well into the future as we continue our mission of finding and developing talented players and chasing additional championships for our fans, end quote. Finally, Todd Bowles said, quote, I'm excited to continue working with Jason for years to come as we build on the success we've enjoyed and keep reaching for even bigger and better goals. My family loves Tampa, and we're looking forward to delivering more great moments for our fans in the coming seasons. I also appreciate the confidence that the Glazer family has shown in my abilities to lead this football team. It is a responsibility that I do not take lightly and am honored to have, end quote. Since joining the Bucs in 2019, Todd Bowles' defenses have been among the best in the NFL, starting with the rush defense, which has a league-leading 93.8 yards allowed per game, a league-leading 4 yards per carry allowed, and the most fumble recoveries with 68. They're also top 5 in sacks with 281 and red zone efficiency at 53.8%. And I saw a list the other day putting Bowles in a tier of coaches that were quote unquote on the hot seat. And I can tell you that talk ends right now. When this news broke, I texted the insiders and I said, Jason Light, Todd Bowles, they're getting multi-year extensions. We can put the hot seat talk to bed when it comes to Todd Bowles, because he's not on the hot seat this year at all. Barring some absolutely insane, like fall on your face failures without any injuries that would explain why the team falls on their face, Bowles isn't going anywhere. It would literally take a failure of epic proportions, the likes of which we have never seen in order for him to lose his job after this extension. And I don't see that happening. I've said for weeks, maybe months, that this team is among the best in the NFC, that it can compete with any team in the NFL. They should be viewed through the same lens as teams like the Lions, the Eagles, the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs. There isn't a team in this league that the Bucs cannot go toe-to-toe with. And the big reason for that is continuity. That means continuity along the roster, continuity in the front office, continuity among the coaching staff. Yes, they keep losing their offensive coordinators, and that's because Todd has done such an incredible job of choosing ones that are good. He keeps getting it right. So other teams keep taking them away to be head coaches, and that absolutely stinks for the Bucs, but it's another feather in the cap of the job that Todd Bowles is doing. As for Jason Licht, I've had Licht's back the entire time I've hosted this show. David and I used to get emails and voicemails way back when, all the time, about people who wanted to fire Jason Licht. And we always talked about how good of a job he's actually done. It's just that nobody noticed until Tom Brady showed up. And, the whole reason Brady showed up was because it was a win now roster that Jason had built. And he had done it in a way that when Brady said, hey, I need Gronk, I want Leonard Fournette, I want Antonio Brown, Licht was able to make it happen. He said, you know what, Tom? All right, I got you. And he went and he got all of them. He trades for Gronk. He signs Fournette. He signs Antonio Brown. As far as I can tell, or as far as I could gather, Licht is the 7th longest tenured GM in the league. He has more total snaps played and games started by players that he's drafted in the first 5 rounds of the NFL draft than any other GM in the league. The Bucs had 50 different players start a game for them last year. 40 of them were drafted by Jason Licht. His draft class last year tied for the most first-year starters of any class in the NFL last season. His ability to find players that immediately contribute that he takes in those middle rounds is absolutely remarkable. And the same can be said about his ability in undrafted free agency. But take a look at last year. Jalen McMillan, Tyke Smith, Bucky Irving. The year before, it was Yaya Diaby and Servassier Dennis. This year, we have been talking a lot about Jacob Parrish and the expectations for him coming into this season. Greg Allman tweeted that 27 out of the Bucs' 29 draft picks since 2022 are still on the roster, and they have at least one of their picks from every draft dating back to 2017. Levante is the only player on this team that was here before Jason Licht was. This was a great move by ownership in the same way that it's hard for a player to be out there on an expiring deal. It's the same way for a coach. While there was very little to no doubt that Jason would be sticking around for a while, we kept seeing this stuff pop up about Todd Bowles potentially being on the hot seat. We've talked about him being on the hot seat for 2 years. So this shows that ownership, the organization, they believe in Todd and they believe in his abilities to get this team where we all believe that they can go. And that is competing for a Super Bowl. Over at ESPN, they put together a piece tracking all the first-round picks and the expectations surrounding them as they prepare to enter their first year. That means they were taking a look at Emeka Egbuka, who the Bucs took at 19. Now, I'm sure many of you remember the frustration and the blowback from that night, but things have cooled, and the excitement by fans is starting to grow for what Egbuka can do for this team. Jenna Lane, who of course covers the Bucs for ESPN, said this about the rookie receiver, quote, Egbuka is going to have a big role in the Bucs offense, especially with Chris Godwin still recovering from ankle surgery and even after. He has shown up a ton in the short passing game, really helping Tampa Bay stretch the field horizontally and at times looking like a running back once the ball is in his hands. But he's also been on the end of some big plays downfield, end quote. Now, Jenna also quoted something that Baker Mayfield said during OTA's mandatory minicamp in her snippet when he said, quote, The thing that sticks out is how cerebral he is. He's so smart. Right now, I think we could plug and play him at every receiver spot. He understands the offense that well. That's just him being a pro already, end quote. Here's the thing with Ibuka, and I apologize in advance for inevitably repeating myself. Probably the beginning of next week, I was planning on doing my Ibuka film study and dropping that episode at the end of this week. Looks like I'm going to do it at the beginning of next week, but he might be the most complete receiver that the Bucs have ever drafted. Now, before you start throwing things at me and screaming at your radio, I'm talking about as a prospect being drafted. I cannot remember a receiver that was more refined than Ibuka is right now. That doesn't mean that I think he's going to end up being better than Mike Evans, but Evans wasn't as complete of a receiver when Light took him in 2014. He had all the tools, all the traits, all the upside, but there was still some work to be done. And that's why it was so great that he was taken when he was, so that he could learn from Vincent Jackson, a pro bowler, a consummate professional, and Evans could start to refine some of those things that needed work through the mentorship that he had with Vincent Jackson. That paid off, and now Evans is going to be a Hall of Famer. With Ibuka, this is a player that was never the number one option on his team, yet somehow he winds up as the school's all-time leading receiver and one of the only two players in school history to have two 1,000-yard seasons. And we're talking about a place that, as of late, has rivaled LSU as wide receiver university. You everydayers, my disdain for Ohio State, but that doesn't mean that I don't recognize the talent on that roster and how many players funnel through Columbus, Ohio, that are going to end up being solid to great NFL players. Ibuka has the chance here to become the best receiver of that group to play in the NFL. Here's the other receivers that Ibuka played with: Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith. Not to mention, Ohio State had some dominant running backs over that span as well. Yet Ibuka was the most consistent of all of them. Of all those first-round picks, plus another guy that's going to be the first receiver taken in his draft class, one more that is going to be a first-rounder. And again, Ibuka was never the number one option. And that's what makes him so perfect for Tampa. We know who the number one option in Tampa is. Then, when he's all the way back, we know who the number two option is. So at best, Ibuka is going to be the number three when all the receivers are on the field and 100%. That's going to be similar to where Ibuka was his sophomore season with Harrison Jr. and JSN. Yet Ibuka had just 3 fewer receptions, 2 fewer touchdowns, and 57 fewer total scrimmage yards than Harrison Jr. did. His entire collegiate career prepared him for playing on this team because he is so used to other guys getting their shine and knowing that if one week isn't his week, there's a good chance the next week will be. What I love about Ibuka and why I say that he's the most polished receiver is because there isn't anything that he can't do. And I'll dive more into this on my film review episode, but he runs every route effectively from any spot on the field. He's reliable, and by that I mean that his hands are fantastic while his catch radius is really impressive for a rookie receiver. He was the go-to guy for the Ohio State Buckeyes all 4 years when they needed a conversion to keep a drive going or a spark to get the offense moving. He's not a blazer in terms of speed. He ran a 4.48 at his pro day. He did not run at the combine, but he has the ability to get open against every coverage because of his footwork, because of his refined route running, and because he always positions himself to gain an advantage. That was something I mentioned about Jalen McMillan last year. He was a receiver that always put himself at an advantage as far as his positioning against whatever coverage that he was facing. Ibuka does the exact same thing, but he does it even better. He's going to have every opportunity to be a breakout rookie this season. Now, because of the offense he's in and all the weapons that are around him, he may not put up the same level of numbers as some of the other rookie receivers, and that's fine. He knows that's fine. It's about the team's success. But one thing that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on is the situations in which he gets those targets. Is he the other big third down threat next to Godwin when the Bucs need to move the chains? Is he getting a lot of red zone targets because he's matched up one-on-one while Evans and Godwin are facing bracket coverages? And what about his snap counts? When is he on the field? How often is he out there in 3 receiver sets compared to McMillan? How much does Baker trust him when it's a must-have play? Depending on how the Bucs bring Godwin along, there is a decent chance that Emeka Egbuka ends up as the team's second leading receiver this season. But this is going to be just the start of a really promising career for a player that's going to be the, in my opinion, the face of the Buccaneers receivers within the next few years. Evans isn't getting any younger. Godwin isn't getting any younger. Egbuka and McMillan are the next big wave, and Egbuka is going to be that dude.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right in the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
You are Locked On Rays, your daily Tampa Bay Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
We have the Wander Franco verdict. That's pretty much going to be the gist of what we discuss. A decision has been made. As of Thursday afternoon, he was found guilty on a charge of sexual abuse stemming from a relationship with a minor that started in December 2022 in the Dominican Republic. And he was sentenced not to 20 to 30 years or 5 years, but 2 years of suspended prison time. So a little bit less than I think anybody anticipated from the onset.
Definitely. And it's a suspended prison sentence. So from what I'm reading, this is kind of like he's on free. He has his freedom with just these conditions. Apparently, the main condition said by the judge is that he does not approach minors with sexual intentions, which, come on. I mean, all right.
So really all he has to do to stay out of jail is stay away from girls under 18. Got it. All right.
All he has to do is what we all do.
Yeah.
Just this has been so horrible. And by the way, before we get too wrapped up in this, yes, the Rays swept the Royals. Yes, the Rays were awesome in Kansas City. Yes, we will talk about that. We have to talk about the starting pitching, Chandler Simpson, Josh Lowe, Yandy Diaz, B-Lau, all of that. And we will on Friday's episode. With this being so in your face with Wander Franco, we both think
if Jeff Passan is tweeting about it or Xing about it, it's a big deal. It's national, international news, not just Rays news. So we got to get those likes, got to get those clicks, got to get those views. And we have to talk about Wander, as unfortunate as it may be. And frankly, I'm to the point that assuming he will no longer be a Ray ever again or a major leaguer ever again, I'm totally fine with this being one of the last times we ever have to mention Wander Franco. I'm willing to put a boycott embargo on this situation, this mess. Maybe if he signs somewhere in Asia, it'll be a footnote, 30 seconds worth of content.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, this should be the second to last big episode we have on Wander, because the next thing is MLB's investigation. That'll be the final, okay, what is actually going to happen? Because this unanimous decision, by the way, this was a unanimous decision by the 3 judges, by the 3 panel, the panel of 3 judges. This decision that was unanimous. It can be appealed to two higher levels of courts. So this could drag on, obviously, a little bit more. I should say, with the conviction, and let me quote the great Mark Topkin, with the conviction barring it being overturned on appeal, Wander Franco's chances of resuming his MLB career at any point seem slim, given it will be extremely difficult to get a visa into the U.S. as it's needed to play. So for those of you that don't know this, because I didn't know this either when I started looking into this, the visa needed for work in the U.S., it would be much harder to obtain given that it's a crime of moral turpitude.
Right.
So it all seems to point, without it actually having a finalized decision, that this man is not going to be wearing any type of MLB uniform for the rest of his life, unless he has some from the 2021, 2022, or 2023 season that he keeps in his closet, and he wants to wear it to kind of make himself a little bit more sad, because that's the only way that he's going to be wearing any MLB uniform ever again.
That looks like to be the case, and hopefully that is the case, in my opinion.
Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Well, kaboom, Alabama gets a 5-star commitment.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm happy for Alabama. I mean, this is a big, big, big get. Tim Watts has already put this out there on Bama Online. He said, hey, y'all, digest this and enjoy it. Eat slowly this news, because, you know, we're so bad when we're recruiting guys, and you and I are recruiting guys, when we get caught up in the fanboy stuff as much as anybody. And when you get a big commitment, you're like, okay, now what's next?
Who's next? Yeah, it's so
frustrating. By the way, Max Sutter is next in just an hour or so. But
so that is who's next, or we hope who's next. And pretty confident there.
Somebody did ask when Max Sutter makes his choice. It'll be at 7:45 tonight.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be on just after, just like the show.
Yeah, we'll be on just after that. But let's keep this on EJ Crowell. He is he's a dude, man. I mean, look, I'm going to tell you, yeah, maybe a little baby face would make you think he's, you know, only going to be a junior or whatever. But his arms and everything else make you say, oh, he's a 5-year NFL veteran.
Well, I think people that listen to the show know we've been talking. This is kind of once we stopped, you know, once Ryan Williams signed with Alabama, this sort of turned into an EJ Crowell podcast. We've talked about EJ for a long time. You know, people listen to the show every day know that we've been talking about him for over 2 years, since he was in the 9th grade at Jackson. Great player. You know, where I'm interested, and I'm going to do research on this and talk about it on a future show. I would like to know where I rank him in terms of the in-state backs, since I've been following in-state recruiting, and I'm old. So this goes all the way back to like the late 80s. Where does EJ rank since the late 80s in terms of in-state prospects at running back? It's going to be high. Now I'm going to go ahead, spoiler alert. I'll tell you one guy I'm going to rank ahead of EJ because he was such a 6-star, and to some extent is before the recruiting services were around. But Carnell Williams from Etowah County, that eventually chose Auburn, was a major star that ended up having a great career at Auburn and then was good in the NFL. Carnell immediately comes to mind for me and would probably still rank number 1, but I want to go back through some records and make sure I'm not missing anyone. But EJ's going to be way up there, if not number 2. I mean, he'd be way up there. And there's been a lot of great backs in this state that have signed with Alabama, Auburn, and even gone outside the state.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I got to see Carnell a couple of times in high school, and then, of course, got to see him at Auburn. He was fantastic. I'll say this. If E.J. Crowell did play his final 2 years in high school, I think he can certainly catch Carnell.
Yeah. We never got to see a senior year, and that's a great point.
Well,
that's a great point.
We never got to see it because he'll never have it, and he hadn't had it in him in his junior year. But I'm just basically projecting it based on what we've seen of him as a 9th and 10th grader, and I'm projecting it because we hadn't even really seen his junior year. That doesn't start for another month or two. That's right.
But he's a phenomenal talent. I've comped him. Now I feel better about my comp to Bijan Robinson now that he's not going to Texas, because that made me nervous and I was jinxing the whole thing. But I tried to find an Alabama back during the Saban era, because we've been full of great backs, about who EJ reminds me of, and I had a tough time. He's bigger and more physical than many of them, is faster than some of the bigger guys. I mean, it's just kind of hard to find. When I do the comps, I always start with size. I mean, I'm not going to comp him to a 5'8", 185-pound guy just because, I'm also not going to comp him to Derrick Henry, who's massive. But it's kind of hard to find the right size speed guy because he's so unique in that way. But a size speed guy I did find as a high school prospect, where he just sort of seems identical as Bijan, and then throw in the fact that he catches the ball like Bijan Robinson. Mm-hmm. And obviously Bijan had a heck of a career at Texas and is now one of the best backs in the NFL. I think Crowell has that sort of upside. But let's remind ourselves before we get too carried away, Alabama signed a great back in the last class too, in A.K. Deer. And you know what he looked like this spring? A freshman that was learning college football. He didn't look disappointing. He didn't look not as good as advertised. He just looked like a freshman. We should grant them all that as freshmen. It's okay to look like a freshman, especially with EJ showing up a year in advance.
Oily Crimson Raider.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about that name. He says he reminds him of Saquon Barkley. I
like it. I do like it.
You have to preface this every time you compare somebody to a Derrick Henry or Saquon or something. Nobody's saying he is Saquon Barkley. No. What they're saying is his game reminds me of that.
Their games are like that. That's what it's going to look like.
Do I think he can jump backwards over somebody in the NFL right now? I'm not sure. But I know this. I have seen E.J. Crowell run around, run through, and run by people. So that's sort of what Saquon can do. Now, Derrick Henry can do it, but it's different because he's so big. But yeah, I think that I think Saquon's a good call.
I like that. When I was going through comps, actually, before I settled on Bijan, Saquon was one I really considered was up there. I mean, I do think there are some similarities. Saquon, though, when I think of Saquon, we're not going to get off EJ, but when I think of Saquon's such a workout warrior. I mean, that's the kind of the thing. The first thing I think Saquon literally gets mail in the weight room. I mean, he like lives there. I think the whole, he probably has a whole living room set up there and just kind of lives in the weight room. And I'm not saying EJ doesn't. I'm just saying, boy, Saquon sort of built himself in a lab, literally. EJ, very natural back. Looking forward to what Alabama's going to do with him in the weight room, though.
Donna J212 says, I think y'all forgot about Bo Vincent Jackson. Look, Bo Jackson was incredible in high school, but he wasn't even the top back that year.
That's true.
Auburn signed both backs.
I think Lenny Patrick was also was he in Bo's class, and he was big time. I think he was. But by the way, Donna, and I appreciate you bringing up Bo, because I'm not shy about saying Bo Jackson's the best athlete I've ever seen in my whole life. I mean, but Bo to me is the best athlete ever. But I said the best running back in state since I've been following recruiting. Bo was a little bit before me. I didn't start following recruiting like I do now until about 89, 90, 91, somewhere in there. Bo was actually a senior in high school. I believe his senior year was the fall of 81. So that was just a little bit before my time. So I was prefacing it with during my time. But Bo's the best athlete I've ever seen.
I am the last ape says EJ reminds me of Josh Jacobs. And
I like it. He's bigger. I like it, but he's bigger than Josh Jacobs, which is why I didn't make that comp. I do think they have a similar style. He's similar in style to Josh, but he's bigger. He's gonna be a bigger guy. than Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, he says he runs like Travion Henderson. I can buy that a little because Travion got bigger.
Travion did get bigger. To me, Travion's such a speed. Travion's so fast.
He was.
I mean, to me, EJ's just such a tantalizing combo of the physicality and the speed. And I'm telling you, as good as Travion is, and I'm a Travion fan for sure, great player, EJ more physical than Travion at the same age. As a shout out to EJ. I don't think Travion going into his junior year trucks people like EJ does.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right in the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
Auburn flipped an elite quarterback.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers.
Yesterday, Peyton Falzone, been committed to Penn State since April. Flips to the Auburn Tigers. It just materialized out of thin air, Daryl. I don't really remember a flip being this quick and sudden. I can't think of another one that relates to this.
Yeah, the whole just out of left field thing.
It's
First
awesome.
of all, the region that he comes from. I mean, I think that Auburn doesn't get a lot of quarterbacks from Pennsylvania. This is a classic example, I think, of a kid waiting to get an SEC offer. And what he did, he jumped at it because Auburn offered Falzone June 2nd. And by the way, I just love saying that last name. It just rolls right off the tongue. June 2nd, they offered him, and he commits within a month. This has the whole feeling of, I want to play in the SEC. Big Ten's a great conference, but this might be a kid. His whole statement that he made to Tom Loy about, the school and the environment and it being so faith-based. And there's probably a lot more to this than just the football aspect. And so that's why I think it came out of left field, but it's a really, really pleasant surprise. Because even when Walker White flipped from Clemson, we had heard rumors that was going to happen. It kind of felt like it was coming.
He picked Auburn over Clemson.
Yeah, that's true. He didn't flip. Yeah. But he was,
which I do think is important because the flip is more dramatic.
He was just crystal balled, and everybody thought it was just a Clemson slam dunk.
Agreed.
So yeah, but you're right. It was not an official flip. The flip is really dramatic. I'm just going to throw this out there, and sometimes I'm not looking for angles or looking for side stories. It just pops into my head, and I want to get your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Do you think there was any conversation between this kid and KLS about Auburn's environment, knowing that he went to Penn State, knowing that this kid was committed to Penn State? Maybe there was a phone call made. Maybe there was some kind of back channel conversation that said, hey, it's a great place to go. You'll really enjoy it.
Yeah. So we went live yesterday. Brian Smith joined me. If you missed that live reaction, go check it out. We talked about this briefly. A lot of the live chat said KLS. Possibly. I'm not dismissing it at all. And I kind of hope so. I think that'd be cool. Hey, take a break from working out with the Chargers and call this kid, please. Thank you so much. What I think might be more likely, Alvin Henderson. I think that one might be even more likely.
Oh, that's a great point. And they were on trips together. Yeah, they probably were at games together, right? I mean, Alvin went to
have to think that they know each other, right? I mean, Alvin was committed to Penn State for a little bit.
That's a great point. Didn't even think about that angle. It's fun thinking about different angles.
I don't know too much about KLS's personality or anything. I've only talked to him in media stuff. But Alvin is like the most personable human in the world.
He really is.
It would make sense,
Yeah, it's great. I think couple of things, couple of attributes that I got from Andrew Ivins, the director of scouting for 247, talked about how he's really, really set and really suited for a modern spread attack. I like that. Talks about him being a multiple sport participation guy. I always love that. He's a swimmer and a sprinter. I mean, that's a really
with how long he is, that makes sense.
I mean,
he's
that's
long and lean, 6'5", 200.
Yeah, I mean, that's very athletic. And he basically says he should be projected or viewed as a potential multi-year starter at the Power 4 level with dual threat capabilities that can light up the scoreboard with both his arms and his legs.
You sent me a tweet right before we started recording from Fred VanVleet, who trained Drew Aller, right? The Drew Aller guy. His tweet, it's a video of him throwing, but it says, in my 18 years of QB training, I've had so many good ones, but I don't think I've ever had a QB who's as physically talented as 2026 Nazareth PA QB Peyton Falzone. On top of these physical attributes is a top 1% drive/work ethic to improve. Still a work in progress, but very excited about where things are headed.
That's heady praise right there, because Drew Aller is very, very high.
Good. Yeah.
Projected maybe first round guy, that kind of thing. So, I think that Auburn got a really, really good one, and one that was out of left field, that wasn't talked about. Even the offer didn't come with much fanfare when they offered. So, a unique type of quarterback from a different part of the country. Auburn just doesn't typically do this, and so this is very, very different to me.
Yeah, it goes against so many trends. And I mean, it only, like, as we're recording this, it only happened like an hour ago, and I'm still kind of processing it just because it happened so fast. But you're right. I mean, Auburn doesn't recruit Pennsylvania quarterbacks. That's not a thing, especially guys who are already committed to Penn State. It's just so different from anything we've seen. And we've talked about, Auburn in this Landon Duckworth competition with South Carolina and Ole Miss. And of course, Auburn making the top 2 and all that, and making the top 2 for Travis Burgess and just missing out. And it's like they were tired of being second. Let's go find this other guy that fits what we want to do, and it may make more sense as far as expectations for, when he'll be able to see the field.
Absolutely. And I mean, I get it. People don't care a lot about trends or history and all that. But there used to be a time where Pennsylvania quarterbacks were like, you get one out of high school, they end up being Hall of Famers in the NFL, and there was such a long list of the Joe Montanas and the Dan Marinos and all that came from Pennsylvania, and it was a hotbed. And, I haven't heard for a long time with really a dynamic kind of blue chip quarterback. Penn State was looking to get 2 quarterbacks in this class. That may be another reason.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, yeah. They were. Yeah, I read that they were looking to get. I went to one of the guys that I shared information with about Keandre Lambert-Smith last year. That's from up in Pittsburgh. He wrote something about how losing him was, a lot of that had to do with, that maybe that they felt like they were wanting to take 2 QBs. Auburn was only wanting to take 1. It speaks volumes when we say, hey, we want to take 1 and you're our guy.
Yeah, sure.
That matters. So
yeah. I can't wait to I'm going to have Zach Seiko on of Locked On Nittany Lions, possibly this afternoon. We'll see. We'll see when we can get that together. But I look forward to hear more of the Penn State side of it too, because they didn't see this coming. They didn't see this coming at all. This materialized very quickly on their side too. So this is just such a unique case of what's going on, or is so different, especially with all these like official visits that these kids take, and the contract discussion and all that. It's so like heavier, I guess, than it typically has been. And then just to see this, it's like, oh, this is super fun. This is so different in almost every way than the way we normally react and talk about a kid committing.
I can't wait to see what he does his senior year. This is one of those kids that you really, really look forward to seeing Friday night stats from, and what he puts up, playing in Eastern PA from Nazareth, Pennsylvania, what kind of competition he plays against, what number, because it goes to, it kind of seems like it would be a natural progression. He improved a lot between his sophomore and junior year, and that is in a scouting report. So from his junior to senior year, let's see how much he improves and how much better he is. And it'll be fun watching him tracking him. And he seems like the kind of kid, look, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but if he's such a hard worker, won't mind working to earn, doesn't expect I'm going to get on campus and I better play, right? I'm going to earn that spot. I know I got Deuce Knight ahead of me, but let me work hard and earn my chance. I think there's a lot to like about this. Really
awesome stuff. Awesome stuff.